sun go down? Remember those discussions? We know when it's light, we know when it's night, but how do you determine what's going on in that period known as twilight? And rabbinic discussion is often very interested in those liminal issues. So this is a series of what they would consider liminal issues, not clearly male, not clearly female. What do you do with this? So they had people who they would see as androgynous. And are they male? Are they female? Are they both? And generally, if you look at the law, the person who is considered androgynous would follow both sets of obligations, depending on the situation. Then they had someone who would be called a tumtum. And that's a person whose sex is unclear. You just can't tell according, by physical observation. And maybe they didn't develop, sort of testicles didn't descend. There may be some sort of physical covering. We just don't. There are different reasons why the person is not clear. Today, that's a medical issue as well. Children are born with unclear sex, and that's an interesting contemporary medical ethical issue, how one deals with that. But that's not what we're going to be talking about at this moment, because in the rabbinic period, the medical science was unable to deal with that. You just had to observe it. So these are ambiguous, indeterminate sex. We might call them also intersex. And since it is clearly liminal, we don't know. Most of the legal rulings are conditional because we have to figure it out, and we just don't know. We have another category of people who are called Ilonit, assigned female but does not develop female traits. So that is the external anatomy at birth would indicate that this person is female, but as the person grows older, does not enter puberty and develop female traits. So today we might say someone is infertile, maybe intersexed, androgen insensitivity syndrome. We have lots of ways of understanding why this might happen. We may call this person a trans man. This person may understand himself or herself or itself or their self as intersex. They may be considered infertile. There are different ways that they may understand who they are. In halacha, depending on the situation, they would be considered as if they are male, but in other times they would be considered as if they are female. And then the sixth category is the saris, and there are two kinds. This is a person who's male, but lacks or loses male characteristics or traits, and often seen as like a woman. So one is the saris adam, and that we might be considered in someone who develops the condition later in life, castration, and that would be a eunuch. And there were a significant number of eunuchs within a society in late antiquity. And then you would have a saris hama, and that's someone born with the condition. So looking at the Talmudic way of the world, that they see, understand, basically from physical observation, which we might call sex, 6 different ways of assigning gender roles and gender identity to people. How this plays out in contemporary Jewish thought is interesting. How it is used in people with general understanding, people who are trying to understand this material in contemporary ways is also very interesting. We're not going to do that today, but I think it's important for us to understand that when our ancestors were looking at something that we see as basic as gender, sex, sexual identity, and sexual orientation, are working with a whole different set of categories. That's to go on then. You can take that home and then deal with it. But before I go on, any questions? I can't believe I was so clear. So now we'll continue. We learned in the Mishnah, one whose wife was pregnant, and he said, may it be God's will that my wife will give birth to a male child. It is a vain prayer. What would you think the rabbis would think about a gender reveal party?
I don't think they'd be too happy about it.
Why not, Mark?
Well, the whole creation of a child is such an amazing feat that I think the mystery is an important part of that.
Okay.
Just my opinion.
Oh. What do you think the rabbis would feel about a baby shower before the birth of a child?
Go ahead, Ira.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it would be, again, it's God's will about the birth of a child. So to throw a shower before, especially since you wait 8 days for Brit Milah, if it's a male, I don't think that they would, at least theoretically, be in favor of it at all.
But they're celebrating a miracle, so what's wrong with that? I mean, why would they object to that? Isn't that what a shower is? It's just celebrating a miracle.
Rochelle, I didn't say against the baby shower. I said it once before the baby's born.
Right, that's what a baby shower is, right? It's before the baby's born. Yeah. I mean, the pregnancy is a miracle. I guess I was looking at the pregnancy as a miracle, not just the birth.
Generally, Jewish tradition discourages doing anything for the baby until the baby's safely delivered.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yes, so traditionally, you don't do much. You don't have to. Shouldn't set up a baby's room. You shouldn't have a shower. You can see how that would be really important in a period with a very high level of what I would of child mortality. When babies died, very young, so that would be a way of really problematic. But even today, the advice would often be, don't. Hold on, someone's trying to answer me. Okay, would be wait. Stillbirth and late third trimester miscarriages are just devastating.
And that supports what Judaism says about when the baby becomes a person. It's at birth.
It's at birth. And the death of a newborn is so devastating that the tradition doesn't provide any established rituals. So that everything we know that goes on in a Jewish funeral only would fall into place if the child has lived 30 days. So if a child dies before that, there's no prescribed ritual.
So there's no special brachas during pregnancy?
Oh, you're praying for you having a healthy birth.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
You can pray for the future.
Okay.
You can't pray for what is determined. You can pray that the child's healthy. You can pray that the child is, from their point of view. I mean, we know that a lot is now set genetically, and we can check those things out. But for them, you can't pray that it's a boy or a girl. That was determined early. You can pray that it will be born successfully. You can pray that if it's a daughter, she'll marry a rich man. You can pray that, the kid will be a good Talmud scholar or successful cobbler. Those things you could pray for, but you can't pray for things that already happened.
Thanks.
Okay.
Rabbi Ann has her hand up.
Oh, Anne, yes.
I was just going to ask, because my mother was very much would not want a baby shower when I was pregnant, and was like, oh my gosh, I was like so scary for her, the idea of me having a baby shower, because she thought it would bring bad luck.
Yeah.
But
Right.
she was also the same way with like birthdays, like she wouldn't celebrate a birthday before the actual birthday. I don't know if that's all somehow related.
It is related, but in other ways, it's also related to the idea of the evil eye.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is also an important cultural understanding, less so today, but in those days, with a sense of a zero-sum economy, that one person's success, it could also be another person's loss. Characteristic of modern economic systems, whether you're socialist or capitalist, is a sense that there's a growing amount of goods. It's sort of, I guess, a win-win ultimately. Though at any one moment, there's a limited amount, but over the long term, things will get more and more people will get more and more things. But in a world in which it was very limited, only a certain number of things, you don't want anyone being jealous of you and wishing bad things on you and things like that. And we still try to protect ourselves against the evil eye. Some of us may carry a hamsa. Sometimes you may say something and spit a couple times, or at least symbolically spit, poo-poo.
Yeah, poo-poo.
Poo-poo.
Poo.
Or you might say Kenahura. And this is characteristic not only of Jewish culture, but of many cultures, particularly Mediterranean cultures. Some people carry sort of that little eye symbol that you see throughout the Mideast and Greece and even in Italy, as a way of protecting yourself against the Malakos, the evil eye, the ayin hara. You may say Kenahura. So that also plays into this stuff as well. So now we are going to go into a little Misa, which is the exception that proves the rule. So, would someone like to start reading number 12?
I can read.
Please.
Is a prayer in that case ineffective? Depends on a miracle. Why Leah had a daughter, Dinah. Rav Yosef raises an objection based on a baraita. It is stated, and afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah, from Genesis. The Gemara asks, what is meant by the addition of the word afterwards?
We stop for a moment, and you know what's going on here. Why do you need this word acher, va'acher? Now, what does it add to the story? And we've learned enough about rabbinic interpretation of scripture is that every word is important. And if a word seems to be possibly superfluous, and the eternal copy editor the editor didn't cut it out saying it wasn't needed, it must be there for a reason. So they're going to figure out, or at least Rav Yosef is going to figure out, what does afterwards mean here?
What does the verse seek to convey by emphasizing that after the birth of Zebulun she gave birth to Dinah. Rav said, after Leah passed judgment on herself and said, 12 tribes were destined to descend from Jacob. 6 came from me and 4 from the maidservants. That is 10. And if this fetus is male, my sister Rachel will not even be the equivalent of one of the maidservants. Immediately, the fetus was transformed to a daughter, as it is stated, and she called her name Dinah, meaning she named her after her judgment, Din. Okay.
This is the crucial thing for us. What does it say?
The Gemara rejects this. One does not mention miraculous acts to teach general halacha.
Ein mazkirin ma'aseh nisim. So miracles don't prove anything. They're miracles. But what does this tell us about Leah?
Ira's got his hand up, Rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this even before we got to this paragraph, and that it was really important to have males, because the males are the ones who would become the tribes. They're the ones who could own property and pass the inheritance on. Whereas if you have a daughter, the daughter will become part of the household to the family of whomever she marries. So it's important to first have a male.
Okay, but that's really good. I'm really thinking here about the understanding of Leah's relationship to Rachel.
You mean yeah.
And why it is so important for Leah to make sure that she doesn't have a boy for the reason that you gave, Ira. So she goes, 12 tribes are descended to descend from Jacob. Well, I already have 6 sons, so that's 6. And we already have 2 of the maidservants, the concubines, and they got 2 each. So 4 and 6, that's 10. So that leaves 12 left. And, my sister, she's already had Joseph, but she hasn't had another one yet. And here I am pregnant. And if I get a boy, she's really going to have nothing. She's just going to have 1 kid. And her status is even less than the maidservants.
Jealousy.
Well, she doesn't. I know she's concerned about her sister's status.
I thought that she
doesn't want to have another boy.
Oh, I see. Okay.
She says, God forbid I should have another boy.
Okay.
That would be terrible. How would my sister feel?
Oh, okay.
So she said, dear God, I don't want a boy. I want a girl. So immediately the fetus is transformed into a female. Okay, she gets a daughter. And then the halacha, the Gemara says, that's cute. Ein mazkirin ma'aseh nisim. That's a wonderful principle. Sort of miracles don't determine Jewish law. There's we'll get to probably next year when we go through some of the important stories, but there's a story of the oven, in which Rabbi Eliezer is in debate with the sages whether this is kosher or not, blah blah blah, and he calls on miracles, one miracle after another, defends his point, and the rabbis basically say that's interesting, and then God basically says, rabbis are right, my children defeated me. What determines halacha is careful observation of life and the application of legal principles to understand how things are going on.
So the halacha here is that you can't pray for the sex.
You can't pray for it. Yeah, Rachel, Rachel, Rochelle, you are not Leah. This happens to someone like Leah, and it doesn't happen often. You don't determine those things. You don't pray for miracles. is another way of putting for it.
Mhm.
So now we get into fetal development. But as you know, the Gemara is never happy with one answer,
Mhm.
particularly when we're interpreting a maaseh, a maisa, a Nagadic statement. So would someone like to continue?
I'll read.
Yes.
The Gemara introduces an alternative explanation. And if you wish, say instead that the story of Leah and her prayer with regard to the fetus was within 40 days of conception in the 6th week. As it was taught in a Baraita, during the first 3 days after intercourse, one should pray that the seed not putrefy, that it will fertilize the egg and develop into a fetus. From the 3rd day until the 40th, one should pray that it will be male, first through the 6th week. From the 40th day until 3 months, one should pray that it will not be deformed, in the shape of a flat fish, as when the fetus does not develop, it assumes a shape somewhat similar to a flat sandalfish. From the 3rd month, 12th week, until the 6th, 24th week, one should pray that it will not be stillborn, the viability of the premature baby. And from the 6th month until the 9th, one should pray that it will emerge safely. Therefore, during the first 40 days from conception, one may still pray to affect the gender of the fetus.
Okay, so they're saying in the early period you can. One of the things that you have to know that within Jewish law, that I think until, what is it, 40 days, the embryo is considered kamayim, to be like water. And that's why what we would call early abortion is not at all prohibited in Jewish law. That is why even the most orthodox interpreters of Jewish law had no problem with stem cell research. Remember when that was a big issue?
Mm-hmm.
So that to clone a fertilized egg is not halakhically problematic. Why might one think that? Why was within that first early period, the first month or so after conception, the fetus wasn't, or the embryo wasn't really considered as being there? How big is an early embryo?
Pretty tiny.
Yes. And if there were a miscarriage and it were discharged, particularly within the first couple of weeks, would anything be seen?
No.
No. So halacha decisions in the Talmudic period really depend on what was observable. You can do it in other ways. If after you wash your lettuce, no, there are always little bugs, but if you wash your lettuce and there's the possibility of little buggies still on it, because they're always little things. If you can't see them, can you still eat the lettuce? You wash it well. I mean, even today they're crazy with some people are crazy with lights and things like that, but you can't get it all off. You can eat things that you can't see. If you're having some chicken soup and you drop a drop of milk in it, accidentally, because you're not a great cook and you're trying to make a cup of coffee while the chicken soup is going, and you can have your nice some coffee, and you drop a little bit of milk in. How much does it take to invalidate this chicken soup, make it treif?
Only if you could see it.
Yeah, basically, or taste it in this case. And they say if it's more than 1/60th, then it becomes treif. But if it's 1/60th, less than that, you don't worry about it. It's minuscule. So this idea of what you can see is really important. What is perceptible to basically the unassisted human eye, the unassisted human taste. So that's what's going on here. So the first 40 days, you could do it. The beginning is that you want the not to putrefy. Then as it develops and begins to have a form that is looking like human, then you can pray it could be boy or a girl. After the 40th day, you want the fetus to develop, and you've all seen from high school biology how fetal development goes through. It looks like it goes through the various stages of evolution. So you don't want it to be stuck there. From the next period, you don't want it to be stillborn. And apparently sometime after the 6th month, even in those days, there was a chance that had the baby been born, they could keep it alive. So after that, you want to have a safe baby. So sort of looking at our understanding of fetal development and the Talmudic understanding of fetal development. So first 2 weeks, germinal is what we might call it. Fertilization, cell division, implantation. So the Talmud is really thinking about successful implantation. As I can try, not a biologist, not a medical doctor, just a rabbi, try to understand what's going on. So that first period is you want it to implant. And that would be not putrefy, and that would be basically their understanding of what happens. So just as another thing, in rabbinic thought, there are simply 2 theories of fertilization that reflect the thought of antiquity. One is that it's an image of the receptive womb being fertilized by the seed, such in a way as that the male places the seed in the ground. Another, and probably equally powerful one, is that a successful pregnancy requires 3 participants. It requires something called the male seed, which was the semen, which they would call the white seed. It would include the woman's sexual fluids, which they would call the red seed, I think reflecting the menstrual period. And it would also include the divine spirit. So that is a very common understanding that you need both the man and the woman to contribute to the child, to building the child, but the child won't come in alive unless God wants it to be. You need the divine spirit. And that, I think, also reflects biblical understanding that people don't have children unless God is involved. And that also can explain their understanding of the possibility of a miracle birth, because the divine spirit is far more of a virgin birth, because the divine spirit is what's really important. Men and women can have as much sex as they want, but unless God wants it, no baby occurs. But here's this first thing is successful implantation. And there are things that you can do, and we'll see a little bit of it later, to ensure that. And you can pray and understand that your intercourse is a religious act, a sexual act that has a certain purpose. That's all allowed. Then the next sentence is embryonic. in our sense, 3rd to 8th week, organ formation, heartbeat, limb, buds, facial features. So if those things are being developed and you only work on physical, what you can see, so that an aborted fetus or a miscarriage in that period would come out, and our ancestors with their scientific interests would look at that, and you could see whether it looks, even at that point, maybe it looks more male, maybe it looks more female. So that's when they're talking about it, because it's becoming visible if you happen to be able to see it. And the first trimester is when you can see these systems growing, early movement. So they're talking about a healthy fetus, no deformity. Again, because you could see a miscarried fetus at that point. When do we usually count it as a viability? Isn't that? Does anyone remember what our sense is of viability? It was important for the Roe versus Wade discussion.
I think the original decision in Roe v. Wade assumed that the baby was not viable until the 3rd trimester.
Okay. Third trimester.
Wikipedia says 23 or 24 weeks.
Yeah. So that's basically what the rabbis understood.
Mm-hmm.
That even in their time, if you had a preemie, they could possibly keep that preemie alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last trimester is when everything grows. And that's when you want to pray for a safe delivery. If you made it so far into the 3rd trimester, the real danger to the child, particularly in their days, would be childbirth.
Rochelle
and childbirth
has her hand up,
was
Rabbi.
What?
Rochelle has her hand
Yeah,
up.
Rochelle.
Yeah, I was just curious how in Talmudic time they would accurately be able to figure out how many weeks pregnant a woman is.
Mm.
I didn't think it was, that obvious without scientific examination like is done today.
Well, I don't know how accurate they are even today.
But probably more accurate than they were in those days, right?
But basically, I think that they had a sense was, you would have intercourse, a couple would have intercourse, and it would be a little easier with Jewish people because they would only have intercourse during a certain time of the month. So you have a week and a half or so that there would be no intercourse because of family purity laws. And generally, right after a woman is cleansed from from the ritual impurity after going through the mikveh and waiting, these are younger people, and what usually happens when you have sexually active young people who haven't had sex for a week and a half, 2 weeks? My guess is they're in bed just having a good time. So you have a fairly good idea, when you may have had a successful implantation.
It just seems a little odd.
Yeah, it seems odd, but even today, how do you know whether it was,
right. Right.
And you're a couple's having a sexual intercourse. They have it every day, because they want to make a baby, but is it the one that did it happen on Thursday, or did it happen on Tuesday, or on Saturday? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. They guess even with an ultrasound. So
yeah,
how could the rabbis in Talmudic time be so,
it's even an estimate now.
Yeah.
So So yes, it was an estimate then, but they did have an idea as, when was the last time you had sex?
Yeah, it's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting is that they were observant, and their observations are relatively, are not out of sync with what we know about embryonic development. That's all I think it's really important. So they're aware of the world. They may be interpreting it differently. They have different tools and different things. The same way when we talk about astronomy, they saw the heavens the same way as we do. They understood it differently, had different theories. So here's the fun part. How do you determine a boy or a girl? And this is what we're going to end with. Would someone like to read 14?
I'll read.
Yeah.
The Gemara asks, is prayer effective for that purpose? Didn't Rav Yitzchak, son of Rav Ami, say, the tradition teaches that the gender of the fetus is determined at the moment of conception. If the man emits seed first, his wife gives birth to a female. If the woman emits seed first, she gives birth to a male, as it is stated, when a woman emitted seed and bore a male. The Gemara answers, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where they both emit seeds simultaneously. In that case, the gender is undetermined and prayer may be effectual.
Okay. So this is, I guess, a very interesting little piece of information. First, it tells us that maybe you shouldn't be teaching Talmud probably wouldn't be allowed in lots of school districts these days. Two, it gives a sense that it talks about within the sexual act that they see the release of bodily fluids as the admission of seed, and that the woman and the man have both a sense of zara in them, some sort of, they're both necessary for the child. There's a sense here that particularly from a male point of view, your wife's sexual pleasure is really important, because if you want a son, which you really want, because Ira pointed out this is a patriarchal society, you better make sure that your wife is having, let's say, a good time. Because if you're only concerned for yourself, you're not going to get a boy. So if you're selfish, you don't get what you want. So there's a sense that maybe prayer is effective, but not all prayers are verbal. And what do you do if people climax at the same time? Well, then you can say a prayer. But it's only good for a little while, for 40 days, because by then it's stuck. Okay, so here we had a nice little interest in biblical and sort of Talmudic medical and science, their understanding of sex, gender. We didn't really talk a little bit about anything about identity and orientation. That's another range of issues. We did hopefully understand that many of these issues are time and space dependent. They're culturally dependent. They saw that, however, our sages were living in a period in which their medical observations were very careful and in general sort of were in line with what we still see today, though their interpretation is different. We saw that they depended a large extent on what you could perceive, see in this case, but in other areas would be hear and taste. We saw that they're particularly interested in the liminal. And let's see, was there one other thing? No, that was enough for that. Those are, I think, our basic take-home lessons from learning all this stuff. Any questions before we leave? So I'm going to turn off the screen share and just a couple more things I'd like to talk about. One is yesterday was Shavuot. I hope people were able to enjoy the holiday. For our conservative and Orthodox friends, today is the second day of Shavuot, so they will be saying the Yizkor prayers today. Actually, probably most synagogues are just finishing up right now, whereas in the Reformed congregations, we said them yesterday. Shavuot, as you remember, is the is actually the second of the three pilgrimage holidays and commemorates Matan Torah. Within the Reformed tradition, because it commemorated Matan Torah, that is the giving of the Torah for the English. That was the time when the Jewish people accepted Torah, accepted the covenant. And that's why within the Reformed tradition, they use Shavuot as the time for confirmation, in which young people, generally around the age of 16, 17, today after the end of their sophomore year, when they are rising high school juniors, would, and still do, be asked to be part of the covenant. The development of confirmation is something that started in the 19th century when the reformers, who were very much interested in reforming Jewish education, realized that at 16, in the beginning of the 19th century, elementary education really wasn't enough, and you needed to go into what they would be, considering high school. So that was the culmination of high school, or what we would call high school, and that would be commemorated and marked. In early 19th century Germany, where this developed, there were no public schools, and the Jewish kids would go to Jewish schools. So that reform was not only a religious reform, it was also a cultural and educational reform. Even today, we still understand that at 13 years old, people are ill-equipped to become Jewish adults. And we still try to encourage our young people to continue studying. But as you all know, and as you demonstrate every week, Jewish education does not end at 13 or 16 or 18, but is something that you can continue throughout your life. And as you also have just witnessed, it gets a lot more exciting and interesting once you become an adult, because we can talk about certain things that you can't just share with kids. So those are my observations. I hope everyone had a lovely and wonderful Shavuot, that you were blessed with the opportunity of having blintzes or cheesecake, or at least a scoop of ice cream. If not, please have one today. And I wish everyone all the best. And we are now on our way to complete our tractate. So hopefully by our last class at the end of this month, we will hit all the big parts